Hey, this is Dr. Mariza Snyder, women's hormone expert, and today I want to shed light on one of the biggest, most overlooked areas in a woman's health journey, and that is that transition to menopause, known as perimenopause. Now, I'm going to be candid with you. I'm in perimenopause, so this topic is near and dear to me. And I would argue that perimenopause is that critical 10 plus year window where we are shaping our health outcomes in the future. And right now, our health outcomes are not looking so great after menopause. As I've shared on my Energized with Dr. Mariza podcast, is that women by the age of 45 are more likely than men to be obese or overweight, which is a significant risk factor for type 2 diabetes. 88% of women by the age of 45 will have one marker of metabolic dysfunction, and 67% of Alzheimer's patients are women. And lastly, probably the most alarming stat of all, because most of us think of this as a men's disease, is that more women than men will die of cardiovascular disease, the number one killer in women. Now, a common thread when we look at these statistics is that there are major shifts and changes that happen to women in perimenopause regarding their hormones and their metabolic health. And for some reason, we are missing the boat. What I see so often is when women are navigating perimenopause, they are not clear that they're even in perimenopause. They start to notice some changes and some symptoms, but it can be very unclear that they're actually in the transition. Now, I want to tell you that there is no real lab testing or definitive test to diagnose perimenopause. It's really about that age range heading into menopause, which is usually in our 40s, but can happen as early as our mid to late 30s. And that we start to see these shifts and changes in our cycle. So what I want to recommend to you today is some ways in which you can prepare for perimenopause and even know that you're in it. And then how we can protect our body, not only our hormone health, but our metabolic health, so that we actually soar with vitality and energy and brain function throughout what I consider to be the second half of our life. So the first thing I always recommend to women is get lab testing. Know your numbers. And Oprah always talks about this, is how important it is to know our numbers. And I agree, like having baseline metabolic numbers, lipid numbers, hormone numbers are super critical when it comes to navigating this transition. And the earlier that you get those labs and you consistently have them every single year with your annual exam, the more insight you're going to get into what is happening with your body. I'm talking about blood sugar, I'm talking about hemoglobin A1C, lipid labs, looking at inflammatory markers, looking at your thyroid hormones, looking at your hormones and cortisol, and even some serious important nutrients like magnesium and B vitamins. When you get a full scope of what is going on with your body, you can really shift and change those things because you are measuring them over time. So looking at your labs consistently is key. Number 2 is going to be tracking your menstrual cycle. One of the important signs of perimenopause is that the luteal phase of your cycle, that second phase after ovulation, is going to shorten. Also, the first hormone that tends to shift during perimenopause is going to be progesterone. So you may notice a week prior to your period, you're experiencing mood changes, you're experiencing more intense PMS symptoms, maybe sleep issues, bloating, some weight resistance around that time, crazy cravings, lumpy, heavy breasts, or maybe heavier periods. But also you could be experiencing some spotting too. Basically, if you start to notice changes in your period, especially regarding a shortened cycle, that has a lot to do with a decline in progesterone and a lot to do with the fact that ovulation is beginning to shift, and maybe you're starting to have anovulatory cycles, meaning you are not actually ovulating during the time of ovulation. And that speeds up as we get closer and closer to menopause, because what menopause really is 12 consecutive months of not ovulating. And that's when we finally define you as hitting menopause. And then from there on out, you are in menopause. And so perimenopause is really what we consider that second period, that wind down time where you are starting out ovulating every single month, progesterone's looking okay, and then you start missing ovulation ovulation that shifts your progesterone levels till eventually you are not having ovulatory cycles anymore. Now, in the process of that, outside of tracking your menstrual cycle and knowing, wow, I was once having a 30-day cycle, now I'm having a 27-day cycle, getting a sense of what's going on with your menstrual cycle. Also, it's important to take on some really critical lifestyle habits. So I want to share the ones that are the most important as we're navigating perimenopause, so that we don't see those poor health outcomes after menopause and even towards the end of perimenopause. So the first thing that I've seen in women, because I put a lot of tracking devices on women, particularly Whoop straps, Oura rings, and continuous glucose monitors, I want to know what's going on with their sleep. So one of the things I always recommend to women, especially as their hormones begin to shift in perimenopause, is to become fiercely protective of your sleep. And that means having a solid sleep routine and ensuring that you are creating a good sleep hygiene experience that delivers deep, restful sleep. So here are 3 recommendations around that. 1, making sure that you are avoiding blue light and screens about an hour before bed. I know it's hard to do, but man, is it critical for boosting that melatonin and getting deep, restful sleep throughout the entire rest of the night. Number 2 is eating 3 hours. So that last meal before sleep is 3 hours out, so that your body is not digesting and it's focusing on recovering and resetting the night that night of sleep. And number 3 is to make sure that you have got great sleep hygiene. And what that means is that it's cool enough in your room, that you wind down with a sleep routine that feels good to you, whether it's essential oils or a journal or a book to read that's an actual book. So just making sure that you have those things in place. And then also my recommendation is supplementation. Think about taking magnesium glycinate before going to bed to kind of lessen that mental chatter and to really ease your body into sleep. And so every single one of us is a little bit different, but just note that ensuring that you get deep, restful sleep is going to make a massive difference, not only on your metabolic health, but also on your hormones as they are shifting into menopause. Number 2, you want to make sure that you are eating metabolically healthy meals. And I also call those hormone loving meals as well. So protein focused, my recommendation is 30 grams of protein per meal, especially around breakfast and dinner or whenever you break your fast. Making sure that you are consuming a ton of fiber. We really should be getting anywhere between 35 grams to 50 grams of fiber every single day through fruits and leafy greens and things like chia seeds and basil seeds and flax seeds. Like getting where you fit in, just get that amount of fiber. And then really mixing up the color of the rainbow. Remember, a big part of this perimenopause transition is going to be around our gut health and our liver health. And so when we're eating metabolically healing foods around fiber, lots of colors of the rainbow, protein, and healthy fat sources, we really are setting up our microbiome and our liver to function well, to process our metabolic and, reproductive hormones, to ensure that our body gets all of the nutrients to function on a cellular level. Next, I want you to focus on resistance training. Your muscle is your metabolic sink. It is so critical to maintain. And as we get older, as early as our 30s, we start to lose a percentage of our muscle mass over time. And it even increases and accelerates after the age of 50. So we want to make sure that we are maintaining it and even growing more muscle mass so that we feel vital, energized, and we have strength and endurance. Because I don't know about you, but I want as much strength and endurance for as long as possible. And also I want my metabolic engine to be working efficiently, and muscle mass allows us to have that. So my recommendation is 2 to 3 times a week, about 30 minutes a day, those 2 to 3 times, to be lifting as heavy as you can. And again, this is individual to each and every person, but the heaviest you can lift, that's what you're looking for to build that muscle. And then the next thing I recommend is keeping your blood sugar stable. This is one of the most critical areas when it comes to perimenopause and beyond, because as I mentioned before, about 88% of us by the age of 45 have one marker of metabolic dysfunction, and it's often insulin resistance. And that's driven by deregulated blood sugar levels. So I want to make some recommendations around maintaining good blood sugar. One, walking after meals is a game changer. I'm talking about even 10 minutes of walking after a meal can lower your post-meal glucose and insulin levels. Starting your day with a metabolically healthy meal is also critical. So again, having a breakfast that's savory, that is protein focused with 30 grams of protein, healthy fats, and fiber, not only is going to keep you full for longer, but it's also going to give you the energy and the stamina that you need to get through your day and keep your blood sugar stable so that you don't end up on the blood sugar roller coaster. And then the other piece of making sure that you are balancing your blood sugar is if you are struggling with some, higher than normal levels of blood sugar, consider adding a supplement like berberine to your regimen. I usually recommend 500 milligrams of berberine every single day to keep blood sugar and insulin levels at a more stable range. So those are my recommendations around stabilizing your blood sugar. And then the last thing is really prioritizing you. Getting super clear on what you love and what really fills you up, and letting go of the things that are obligations or things that don't matter to you. There's so many things that we are doing out of obligation and out of tending to other people, and we forget to take care of ourselves. This is a message that I need to hear, that focusing on me allows me to then show up to the full extent for my family. So those are going to be my recommendations when it comes to navigating perimenopause. And just know that this path to feeling miserable and to feeling blah doesn't have to be that way for any of us. But it's important to know that as our hormones shift and our bodies are shifting, we get to shift with them. We get to pivot as our body pivots. And the biggest lesson I've learned in perimenopause so far is that I deserve and I get to be very intentional about how I take care of my body, what I put into my body, and how I show up for myself every single day. It's probably something I should have been doing in my 20s, 30s, but I didn't. And now that I'm in my 40s, I really get the opportunity to thrive in perimenopause so that I feel phenomenal, not only in this transition of my life, but moving forward in the next several decades of my life. So if you are looking for more ways to navigate perimenopause, I have amazing episodes on my podcast, but also just make sure to subscribe to this show because I will be sharing a lot more tips to come very soon.